When Denuvo 2 was launched in 2009, with the model that required a constant internet connection to run the game, Ubisoft finally thought they had built something that could never be cracked. But it only took 2 weeks to break this entire system, on which Ubisoft had spent billions of dollars. But how? How do you even break the game? Well, speaking of breaking, to break any lock, you need simple things. Either you find the key, or you find the serial key for that lock. And that's how it used to be during the early times when games came on floppy disks. The serial key would be written on the back of the floppy disk. You'd buy the floppy disk, enter the serial key, and start playing the game. But crackers started cracking and distributing it. So developers came up with a clever idea. They started including manuals with the games. And the game key, rather than putting it on the back of the floppy disk, they started putting it in the manual. So whenever you installed the game would ask you to enter the key written on page 14, paragraph 2. Only then would the game install. But hackers found another way. They scanned the entire PDF and put it on the internet. So whoever needed a page could just find it there. What difference did it make? Then came the era of the 90s, when secure ROM and CDs arrived, and it was claimed that they could never be cracked because games started being loaded onto CD-ROMs, and you had to insert the disk to install it. But hackers found a way even for this. They invented some little patches that made the game think the disk was always inserted in a drive, even though it wasn't there. You can still see an example of this today.
When you install any pirated software, it often shows up as a disk ROM because the software is guessing that the disk is in the drive and the content is being downloaded from the disk, whereas it's just a software package. Guys, fast forward to today. Times have changed a lot, and today we have powerful software like Denuvo and DRM. DRM stands for Digital Rights Management, which constantly checks if your game is legitimate or not. To understand it in simple language, imagine the bouncers standing outside who check if you're legitimately entering or if your age verification is complete. But with DRM, this bouncer will always be standing on your head, checking if your game is legitimate by sending a signal to the server and checking it there. And if you look closely, all modern games today work this way. But even this gets cracked. So let's see how it's done. The process starts by getting the original files of the game. Sometimes these hackers buy the games and download all the files locally because they need that unmodified .exe file. The first job for these hackers is to understand the structure of this file. Many experienced hackers can tell just by looking at the file whether the file's structure is DRM based or Denuvo based. After that, these crackers use very advanced tools to carry this whole process forward. The first tool that they use is called OllyDbg. With the help of this tool, they can watch the game as it executes. Think of it this way, you are looking at the game's brain while the game is running. How the code is executing, what code is running at what time, they can see all these things through that tool. And the most important thing they check is how the game is executing the code for ownership, how it's communicating with platforms like Steam and Epic Games. The next most important tool these hackers use is called IDA Pro. Now, how does this tool work? To understand this, you need to grasp a few terms. See, the game file is never shipped in its original source code. Now, what is source code? You may have heard sometimes that the game's source code was leaked and they found something in this source code. Source code is the code that developers write in a human-readable language, using languages like Java, C++, and others. The original code of the game is called a source code, and it looks something like this. And if you simply read this code, you'll understand what is being talked about. For example, in this code, it's written that if the player's health is 0, then show the game over screen. So this is the structure of the source code. But when the game is shipped, it is not shipped in this code. The game is compiled and converted into machine-readable code. Wow, I feel like I've taken a whole coding class here talking about code and all. Anyway, moving on. And that is where the software IDA Pro comes into play, because using it, these hackers convert this entire compiled code into a structure that becomes quite easy to understand. Now, after converting the compiled code into structured code, these hackers check the code to see how the game is checking if you have paid for the game and where those checks are running in the code, and eventually how they can remove it. And that is how the first layer of cracking is completed, because by understanding this code, the part that connects the game to servers like Steam and UBS is removed. If you ask me, this is the easiest part of the process, because the real challenge starts from here. As I mentioned earlier, games today come with two protections, either DRM or Denuvo. Well, DRM is just like Steam and others, which checks if the game is legitimate or not, but Denuvo is the real big deal here. So let's understand how Denuvo works. Unlike DRM, which checks if the game is legitimate, Denuvo is a software that protects the entire code. It injects fake codes or build codes inside the game's code, so hackers cannot understand the structure of the code. Because whenever the game runs, Denuvo encrypts the entire game. And it only decrypts the specific codes of the game that are needed for that scene. So let's say a fight scene is happening or a shooting scene is happening. Rather than decrypting the whole code, Denuvo actually decrypts only that much amount of code. And at the same time, Denuvo also checks if any debugging software is running in the game, like IDA or OLEDBG, so that no one can understand the game's code. Denuvo also checks if anyone is tampering with the RAM or memory. And along with that, Denuvo creates a digital imprint from your legitimate game and your hardware, which it changes every time. Think of this imprint as taking some codes or binary numbers from your SSD or processor, and the game essentially becomes unique only to you, and then these hardware codes are linked to your Steam account, so that your game always remains legitimate. And guys, if Denuvo finds anything wrong during the whole process, it spoils the entire code. That's why if you play the cracked version of GTA 4, the camera starts moving if your car starts moving at a higher speed. But hackers have a way around this too. As I told you that Denuvo decrypts the code in small chunks, while that section is playing, what these hackers do is they dump that memory somewhere else. To understand it in simple language, as soon as a small part of the game is decrypted, they grab it and save it somewhere else. But there's a big problem with this. Because the game is only giving you small chunks of code, you have to play this game many times to get the full structure of the game's code. And that's why hackers sometimes take a lot of time just to release the cracked version of the game. Because they have to play through all the endings, all the save files, all the small missions, everything they have to explore to get the full executable code. Well, now that we have structured the game's executable code, the next step is to clean it up. And this is where the software IDA Pro comes in handy. Because here, you can understand the whole structure, clean it up, and remove the fake and dead-end codes that Denuvo has injected. But this is also a crucial part, because hackers have to fix these games line by line. Because if anything is left behind, the game might crash or not save or act weirdly for the user. He speaks of the user as if people are buying it. But don't underestimate these hackers. They are like entire corporate houses. They will have a programmer, a developer, a QA tester. This is a complete structured process. Well, what's important to these hackers is not how many new games are available on their website. The thing that is most important to these hackers is who is going to crack the game first. Because whenever a new game comes out with a new DRM or Denuvo protection, it claims to be the best version of it. And that's why a race begins among these hackers to see who cracks that best version first. Well, sometimes these hackers get hired by these big studios because they have immense talent in hacking the system, which a company spent billions of dollars making. But somewhere the gaming community also believes that piracy has saved games a lot. I mean, just imagine you would have never played GTA San Andreas or Vice City if you hadn't brought it from a friend on your 4GB pen drive. I mean, there's no chance we could have bought that game for like 1,000 rupees 10 years back. That's why recently movements like if buying is not owning, then piracy is not stealing are quite prevalent in the industry, where people believe that piracy is actually saving the games and we should support more piracy because these companies are getting greedier and they want more money out of our pockets. Well, all things considered, if you have money, you should definitely support these small developers and big developers too, because people spend their time and money developing these games. I mean, after I started earning, my effort has been to buy all my games and support those developers whom I couldn't support until now and whose games I may have bought before, and if a new version of theirs came out, I just go and buy it. So let me know what you think about this, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, peace out.